Hi, Brady. It's Jeff Allen. I was going to actually answer a LinkedIn post and answer two questions. One, but I decided to kind of put this individual video into one of my new books or video series, and then I'll answer the question with this, right? So, this specific video is going to be about traditional norms and cultures, subcultures, organizations, institutions, whatever. What do you want to call them? And the fact that they focus on unity and harmonization and really rely on conformity. They're conformity based. And I think this is a key thing to understand. And I'll give some examples. So, a lot of small little companies are usually not conformity based too much. They can be, if depending if you have a small company with a founder that kind of runs things, then it can be conformity based. But if you got something that's grown a little bit beyond that, more than the mom pop shop, and then if it's a little bit bigger, 10 to 100 people, it's less conformity based in general. I mean, I've seen lots of examples of it not, but anytime you start getting big, and when I mean big is beyond, probably, I don't know the number. I don't know if there's a verifiable number here, but let's say beyond 100, 200, 300 people, and starting in the thousands. I think it's about 100 people. I think it's about 100 people because I'm going to give a few examples here. And it always turns around 100 people ish, depending on the culture too. So um, I wouldn't say ethnic culture, but national culture. So if you've got like governments, they're always conformity based, right? Because it's the government of a country. Conformity based for everybody in the nation, citizens, to follow what are considered the norms of that nation. Okay. And I got a whole series of videos about working with the French, working with the Americans, working with the Chinese, working with the Germans, working with that. I mean, I'll have got that. And those are all speak about the values of each system, right, of each country. Conformity based. In general, there are exceptions, but conformity based. That's government, right? So, and a government represents a nation, a country. The other ones you see are NGOs, big NGOs. They're big institutions. They get funding by donations usually. So they try to do things in standardized ways to do it across different countries. So they're trying to do a conform. They're trying to use conformity-based approaches to be able to offer the same service as much as possible in the same kind of way. Conformity-based. You got to follow kind of the organization to be able to do it, to stay in there. Another things you got. So the governments and things. Big companies are conformity-based. I've worked in several big companies, right? So, and they're very different compared to when I worked in small companies, small medium-sized business. Very different approach, conformity based. Now you can have some examples of innovative things in small teams, of startup kind of entrepreneurship type teams, but it's usually conformity based. That's how you survive in big companies. Churches, and when I say churches, let's say religious institutions, okay? Conformity based. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're Catholic, it doesn't matter if you're whatever Protestant, because there's so many flavors of Protestantism. It doesn't matter if you're Anglican. It doesn't matter if you're, you know, Muslim. I mean, Islam. I mean, and there are many of them, right? There are so many of them, and I studied lots of them because one of my degrees was actually in comparative religious literatures and text. So I mean, in history. So I mean, I studied this for one of my associates, my first bachelor's degree. So I mean, they all have reference texts. Could be the Quran, could be the Bible, could be whatever, right? So those reference texts are are conformity based. They are based on following certain sets of things that you're considered part of the norm of that subculture. And I say subculture because it's not a culture, right? It's a subculture. Usually, religious groups are subcultures within other cultures, national cultures. I mean, it's kind of, I try to separate these slightly. I mean, it's hard because these are all influencing kind of circles of influence. But so religious institutions are And I've made a couple of videos actually about the Anglicanism versus compared to Protestant, other mainline Protestant, many Protestant evangelicals. I made a couple of videos on a video series on that, books, and those cover some of these topics of conformity. So let's cover out some ones. Just trying to think of other ones. I mean, there are wide things here, but what we see across all these different subculture and culture and subcultural context is that conformity is a default thing, and nonconformity is usually seen as rebellion. Now, it doesn't mean that rebellion is always bad, because sometimes rebellion can change things radically. Look at Gandhi, pacifism and rebellion. Look at the whole, the 1960s in America with the black civil rights and all that. Nonconformity. I mean, it seems rebellious, right? And you can see. Think of decolonialization. And the whole thing of decolonialization is rebellion, right, against the countries that had invested in those countries. The colonizing countries that invested in put a set of businesses in their colonized countries or territories, what do you want to call these things at the time. That again is nonconformity. Nonconformity. The whole colonization thing was a conformity thing, right? I got a number of videos on that topic and these other topics. Some of my voice, I have my Halloween voice has not disappeared, and it's November 13th. Still got kind of bronchitis isn't fixed over, right? But so all this is really important, I think, to understand that conformity, and this goes back. Look back at humankind. Just think back, and think about. I've had other videos too that talk about the why we have small talk, and my video about why we have small talk talks about conformity, talks about the things that we use in conformity-based discussions. I talk about it in that What is Small Talk video. Historically, across humankind, going back thousands of years, that we can see in museums. You go to museums, I gave examples in the museums and how this is brought up. You can see these traits. Again, conformity-based traits. Lots of movies that you watch. If you look at the Marvel comic, look at the Avengers. Look at the whole problem that they ran into. So I'm doing a spoiler like years after the fact, right? So, but their whole fight, their whole struggle with Captain America versus Iron Man was about conformity, right? Were they going to conform to or be compliant with what the United Nations decided for them to do for doing, saving worlds, or saving countries, or protecting countries? Would they respect this 120 nation document? Or would they kind of just do it and be mavericks, as they were? They were all mavericks. They're all even mavericks. They brought together as a team, right? But when you work in a team, you got to have some kind of conformity-based things. They're not. I played a lot of bands. Oh, there's another example here too. So, Marvel Comics. Marvel Comics shows us the issue. It's teamwork, right? So teamwork, come to other things. Teamwork. You see this whole conformity-based stuff also in music bands. I played in a lot of music bands, and I play a lot of music stuff my own right now too. And the fun thing to see is that when I play in bands, you gotta have conformity-based stuff, or it doesn't work, right? Gotta work together. You gotta all conform to something, or it doesn't work. Some doesn't conform to the beat. You're kind of stuck, right? If everyone does their own thing, it's chaos, and the band dissolves. But that's why I love playing solo, and I'm a one-man band now. I got all kinds of instruments. I can play several instruments now with loopers and stuff, and I can kind of build the things. But I can do everything myself because I don't have to worry about. I'm not saying I don't like this, But I say I have to deal with scheduling and all this stuff to do with it. To have scheduling too, just scheduling thing is a conformity thing. You got everybody conformed at the same time to be there at the same time, right? That's really tough to do. It's not always easy, especially when you're all based in the same location. And I talk about one of my videos too. Maybe I didn't talk about. I talk about there are two different types of bands. There are those that are affinity based and those that are location based. The location based ones have to conform to a schedule when they're all there at the same time. That's conformity. Even if they don't like to play the same things, but they'll do it just because their audience wants to have those songs. Then there are other types of bands which I say are affinity based, and they're like groups like Toto and the Beatles. They were like friends, right? So they all kind of group together because they have the same songs they'd like to do. They're sometimes brothers, right? Friends and brothers. But that's conformity too because they all like the same songs, right? So and then they all struggled with how they dealt with it afterwards. Each of those types of groups dealt with the struggles, the affinity, so that the location based bands struggled with being together, but they didn't like the same songs. So the thing is, they all had to deal with how they could do the same songs together. They all struggle with making their playlist. Anybody that is location based in the music, they struggle with what's their playlist. I see this all the time. I played so many bands. It's the same problem all the time. It's not a problem. It's just the results of the fact that they're location based. They have a conformity thing on the scheduling. And then they have to deal with how they're going to conform to the same songs. That's the struggle. Two struggles. But affinity based bands, they all like the same songs, so there's not a problem with that. Their struggle is who's going to make decisions when you're going to make business decisions. You're going to make decision what songs you're going to do. You're going to make some decisions. Who's going to be the leader? I struggle with that. So conformity, I've tried to give a bunch of different examples of across the spectrum. I'm not covering everything. I'm just saying things off the top of my head. Conservatories. I've been in the board of one of them, and we grew musicians and our acquisitions 3 times. Conformity based. What music methods are we going to use? What things are we going to use? What kind of approach are we going to use? How are we going to have all the parents come? We're going to have the same kind of offer to everybody. Conformity based. Okay. And then I look at other boards I've been on too and stuff and dealt with, and they're conformity based. Lots of things are conformity based. When you're big, start getting big. You're offer that standardized things, conformity based. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that's what it is. But then you have these social norms, and they're coming up. And I see these comments in these LinkedIn. It's all based on social norms. And sometimes when people break away from the social norms, they're seen as mavericks, lone rangers, whatever you want to call them. But they're usually ones that are innovative to do things beyond. They're the ones that will do things differently, but they'll be seen as outsiders. So I've been an outsider a lot, but I've been I was actually told, it was really funny that I was told by a recruiter about 15 years ago when I was looking to join a medium-sized company. The person said, don't join a big company because you get bored, because you're like a small retail owner. You can see everything from every angle. So you'll drive you nuts if people want to block you and do conformity-based things, and only that all the time. I joined a big company. I've been there for 14 years, and I just changed departments a lot. And I use my skills in where it's needed. So I found a way to make it work, but I do like doing new things. But I'm also an auditor too. So it's the funny thing is I've been able to adjust it to, auditing is another example of conformity-based stuff. When you do auditing, now it depends on how you do the auditing. Okay, I think it really depends. I'm an ISO 9000 certified auditor and approved auditor and all that. And I've done this for 17 years. One of my roles, for about 17 years in 4 companies, was enforcing. I wouldn't say enforcing, applying and sometimes enforcing development processes, but not just development, actually the whole product. Russell can even be in finance and marketing, sales too. It depends on which company, if they want to do that in those areas too. But I've done it across all the different departments in some companies. Sometimes you have to force it. You got to say, this is where to do it. Because we got to show our customers that we're compliant. And then there are times where I said, look, let's gamify this thing. Actually, my current company, I gamified the whole thing. It was fun. Totally loved it. People loved it. They just because I showed them how to be conform, how to conform, but doing it in a way that they don't feel like they're being imposed on them to do this. Right? I made it gamified. They just loved it. I've got up on my LinkedIn profile. I have 10 or more written recommendations about how to make it fun and applicable, because I took the concepts that they had to be compliant, but I didn't make them feel like they had to be compliant. I gamified it so it felt like they were innovating and doing fun with it. This is the key, right? This is the key of dealing with conformity, is gamifying. I think this is a key thing. Gamifying, making it fun so people actually enjoy doing it and don't have to think like they don't have to think and believe that they're actually conforming to something. Like parochial schools, conformity, uniforms. They're all conformant, right? Compliant, conform. I mean, I can go on and on and on. Lots of examples. I've been going for 15 minutes, but I think this is key to understanding what are the things that you can do that are different. When can you be the Indiana Jones that does it differently than just being in a museum and doing the museum style stuff? How do you find a different way to get those museum pieces? Indiana Jones, right? Or Maverick or Lone Ranger. Do it differently. Or Zorro or whatever. Or any of the individual Marvel Comics characters until they became the Avengers, right? And then they struggle with the conformity issue. I think this is something that we all need to think about. It's a philosophical issue, right? Because you have to be conformant to a certain thing to be able to apply, to even be accepted as a citizen in the country, right? Because we all grew up with social norms. But then some of us kind of decide to do things differently, and then you're seen differently. And then sometimes people can accept cognitive and psychologically to be different, and some can't. And I think it just kind of depends on the person. So all this is an issue of a lot of dialogue and debate, right? Some great dialogue. Lots of debate. It can turn into debate and can turn into kind of not so fun debate when you get to my next video on value systems and worldviews. So that's my next video. So, all right. So that's my thoughts for today, at least on the idea of institutions, conformity, and all of that go along with it. Thanks so much.